Ladies, today's tea is so toxic, it requires a hazmat suit. Welcome back to the tea room with Liyue. What would you do if you were secretly working night shifts as an underground doctor to pay for your husband's medical bills? And he walks into your clinic to buy pregnancy medicine for his mistress. Oh, and the kicker, you know for a fact he is completely infertile. Our girl doesn't cry, she charges him triple, bankrupts his entire family, and orchestrates a masterclass in lethal karma. Let's dive right in, shall we? I am a shadow doctor. I've been married to Zhou Yanshu for 3 years, concealing my identity. I washed my hands of it all to cook and keep house, wholeheartedly wanting only to live a good life with him, to earn money for his detoxification and the imperial examination. I've been secretly practicing medicine at the ghost market late at night behind his back, but never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that the patient who stepped into my dim medical tent today would turn out to be my own sickly husband. Doctor, please prescribe me the best pregnancy stabilizing medicine. My wife is pregnant. This is our first child since we got married. I am so happy, I only pray for the safety of mother and child. My wife is young and has a delicate constitution in winter. Her hands and feet turn ice cold. I wonder if you have any miraculous prescriptions for stabilizing the pregnancy and strengthening her body, doctor. Hearing this sincere and heartfelt plea, through the gauze veil of my hat, I almost doubted whether I was in a nightmare. The man before me wore a washed out blue robe, his frame slender, his bearing ethereal. Under the conical hat, his sharply defined chin and jade, like pale skin, faintly showed through. This voice, this figure, it was unmistakably my gentle and refined husband, Zhou Yanshu. This morning my period came, and I was curled up in bed from the pain. He was still busy in the kitchen, thoughtfully brewing me a pot of brown sugar ginger tea. The spicy yet sweet aftertaste of the ginger tea seems to still linger on my lips and teeth, but in the blink of an eye, he is sitting here saying his wife is pregnant. I am not pregnant. More importantly, years ago when he wandered into the deep mountains and was poisoned by that century-old venomous centipede. Although I pulled him back from death's door, the toxin had already damaged his foundation. In this lifetime, he simply cannot have the ability to reproduce. This fetal preservation medicine, who is he buying it for? That bastard child in someone's belly. Whose is it? I stared at him in a daze. Seeing me silent, Zhou Yanshu somewhat awkwardly reached out his hand and waved it in front of the table. Doctor? As he spoke, he pulled out a moonlight-colored pouch from his sleeve and carefully pushed it in front of me. The moment I saw that pouch clearly, my heart suddenly stabbed with pain. Embroidered on it was a pair of crooked, ugly mandarin ducks. This was embroidered by my own hand. A birthday gift I gave Zhou Yanshu last year. I wasn't good at needlework, and at the time I was afraid he'd laugh at me, so I kept putting off showing it to him, but he pulled me into his arms and pinched my nose affectionately, laughing. My Nangsing is beautiful and knows medicine. I always worry you are some fairy descended from heaven. Now seeing these 2 wild ducks, I am actually relieved. After all, a fairy wouldn't embroider mandarin ducks as ducks. My hands hidden in my wide sleeves clenched tight, my nails almost digging into my flesh. Because my movement was a bit large, I knocked over the medicine pestle on the table. Zhou Yanshu was startled, and his expression became uneasy. Doctor, is the consultation fee not enough? He hesitated for a moment, a fierce look flashing in his eyes, then untied a twin fish jade pendant from his waist. This jade pendant is of excellent quality. The pawnshop owner said it is worth at least 10 taels of silver. Will it do as a deposit? Okay, ladies, let's unpack the sheer, unadulterated audacity of this moment. To pay the deposit, he hands over a pouch and a jade pendant. The pouch is the one Nangsing clumsily embroidered for him with her own hands. The jade pendant is the one she risked her life gathering rare herbs on a cliffside for half a month to buy for him. He is literally taking the physical manifestations of his wife's blood, sweat, and tears, and using them to fund his mistress's baby. For my Real Housewives ladies, this is the equivalent of your husband taking the Rolex you bought him for your anniversary and pawning it to buy a Birkin bag for his side piece. It is financial and emotional abuse at its absolute peak. But here's the plot twist of the century. Years ago, Zhou Yanshu was bitten by a highly venomous centipede. Nangsing saved his life, but the toxins permanently destroyed his reproductive system. He is shooting blanks, ladies. He is biologically incapable of having children. He is standing there, weeping tears of joy over a baby that absolutely scientifically cannot be his. And Nangsing, sitting behind that veil, realizes her husband is bankrupting their household to play the proud papa to another man's child. She doesn't scream, she doesn't flip the table. She quietly takes her jade pendant back and says, "Let's go do a house call. That, my friends, is the birth of a villain era, and I am entirely here for it." This jade pendant was the love token I got by gathering cliff cypress for half a month. I opened the pouch. Inside lay 2 gleaming white silver ingots, a total of 10 taels of silver, plus that jade pendant. This was almost all the survival money our poor little household had. This dynasty strictly forbids private medical practice among civilians. In the pharmacies under the Imperial Medical Bureau's jurisdiction, even the most common cold remedy costs a whole tael of silver. Ordinary people would be bankrupted by a single illness. To save Zhou Yanshu, to support his studies, I had no choice but to take the risk and become an unlicensed dark doctor in the ghost market. I split every copper coin in half to spend, enduring his mother's cold glares, staying up through the nights, until my eyes turned red. And he actually used my hard-earned money to buy miscarriage prevention medicine for another woman. I forcibly swallowed the bloody sweetness in my throat, swept the jade pendant and pouch into my sleeve, and spoke in an extremely low and hoarse voice. "Let's go. Pregnancy care cannot be taken lightly. I must make a house call to examine your wife personally." Zhou Yanshu was overjoyed, so excited that he bowed deeply to me across the table. "Thank you, divine doctor. Thank you, divine doctor." In the ghost market, house calls by doctors cost a fortune, starting at 20 taels of silver. Naturally, he had no idea that beneath the veil was his own wife, the one not presentable enough for him. I followed him through winding alleys until we arrived at a quiet little courtyard on the south side of town. Though the courtyard wasn't large, it was maintained quite exquisitely. A fine pomegranate tree grew in the corner, with a newly built swing tied to its trunk. Hearing the sound of the door opening, a woman hurried out from inside the house. "Son, did you bring back the miscarriage prevention medicine?" By the light of the lanterns in the courtyard, I coldly looked at that woman's face. "Oh, so it is my harsh mother, in-law, Zhou Shu. She 3 days ago." She wiped away tears, saying her sister in the neighboring county had fallen critically ill, and she must see her one last time. For this, she even squeezed 3 taels of silver from me for travel expenses. Now here she is, glowing with health in this small courtyard, attending to someone else's belly. "Mother, this is the most skilled dark doctor from the ghost market. I specially invited him to examine Wan Yin." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law immediately showed solemn respect, completely changing from her usual harsh manner at home. With furrowed brows, cold stares, and nostrils pointed to the sky, and became as obsequious as a brothel madam. Oh my, I knew it when the magpies were chirping on the branches this morning. "Divine doctor, what an honor to have you here. Please come in. Have you had your evening meal yet, doctor? Making you come all this way in such cold weather?" I looked coldly at her fawning smile. In the 3 years since marrying Zhou Yanshu, she has despised me for having no parents to support me, despised me for not knowing needlework, and most of all, despised me for not bearing children. How would she know that the one who can't produce children is her precious son, depleted and deficient from poisoning? Lifting the heavy cotton curtain, a wave of warm fragrance hit my face. Inside the room burned the finest silver, thread charcoal, on the canopy bed made of red sandalwood. A young woman with a delicate face and voluptuous figure reclined halfway. This woman, I recognized her, the only daughter of Butcher Liu's family in town, Liu Wanyin. A while ago, dissatisfied with the marriage her father arranged, she actually ran away from home. Butcher Liu fell ill from worry, and even sent people to the ghost market to find medicine. Who would have thought she was hidden here by Zhou Yanshu, becoming his secretly kept wife? When Liu Wanyin saw Zhou Yanshu, she shot him a coquettish glance, her voice so soft it could drip water. "Husband, really, I already said I am fine. Why did you still waste money inviting a doctor to come?" Zhou Yanshu crossed to the bedside in 2 quick strides, pulled her into his arms with eyes full of heartache, that look of having found a precious treasure stabbing pain into my eyes. "Wanyin, these past few days you've been vomiting everything you eat. You've lost so much weight. How could I not feel heartache? What a loving couple indeed. What a picture of marital harmony." I stood there numbly, looking around this warmly decorated room, feeling as if my internal organs were being fried in boiling oil. The 100 sons, 1,000 grandsons brocade quilt covering Liu Wanyin's body was what I ordered at a high price from the silk shop last month. The carved wardrobe standing by the window was what I commissioned from the old carpenter in town. Even the twisted wire silver bracelet on Liu Wanyin's wrist was my only remaining keepsake from before I got married. Zhou Yanshu was like a greedy rat, moving things like ants relocating their nest, taking every single valuable item from our home to please his mistress. I even thought we'd been robbed and reinforced the courtyard walls myself with mud. Turns out, you can guard against outsiders all you want, but it is hard to guard against a thief in your own home. Divine physician. Seeing I wasn't moving, Zhou Yanshu urged gently. I took a deep breath, suppressed all my murderous intent, and stepped forward to feel Liu Wanyin's pulse. A slippery pulse like rolling pearls, definitely a pregnancy pulse. Already over 2 months along. I withdrew my hand and looked deeply at Zhou Yanshu through my veil. The joy and anticipation in his eyes couldn't be faked. He had no idea he was infertile. Behind his back, Liu Wanyin had secretly gotten pregnant with some wild man in this courtyard. Yet he was willingly playing the role of this convenient father. Interesting, truly interesting indeed. This pregnancy of the ladies. I deliberately drew out my words, furrowing my brow, putting on an expression as if facing an extremely difficult situation. Mother-in-law and Zhou Yanshu immediately tensed up. Doctor, what is wrong with my daughter? In-law's pregnancy. Just tell us straight. Mother-in-law anxiously slapped her thigh. This is the precious grandson of 3 generations of our Zhou family line. Heaven is blind, that barren hen at home has cursed our Zhou family. This pregnancy absolutely cannot go wrong. A huge black pot of blame landed squarely on my head. A cold glint flashed in my eyes as I spoke unhurriedly. Madam has been weak since her early years, and with this pregnancy's unstable vital energy and blood, if we don't use top-grade medicinal soups to preserve the fetus and supplement it with golden needle acupuncture once every 7 days, this child, I am afraid, won't make it to full term. Liu Wanyin was scared out of her wits, clutching Zhou Yanshu's sleeve and bursting into tears. Zhou Yanshu immediately turned red with anxiety, patting his chest and promising me, "Divine doctor, just use the best medicine. Whatever the consultation fee and medicine costs, I can afford it all. Ladies, if you thought the husband was a walking red flag, wait until you meet the mother-in-law." Nangsing follows him to a cozy, beautifully furnished secret courtyard. Inside is the mother-in-law, who literally lied to Nangsing days ago, claiming she needed travel money to visit a dying sister. Instead, she's here, playing nurse to the mistress. And the furniture? It's all stolen from Nangsing's own house. Zhou Yanshu has been slowly moving their best blankets and cabinets to his love nest, like a rat hoarding cheese. Then comes the ultimate insult. The mother-in-law calls Nangsing a barren hen, who cursed their family. In ancient Chinese culture, failing to produce an heir was grounds for divorce and profound social humiliation. Nangsing has endured years of nasty glares and verbal abuse from this old woman for being infertile. Meanwhile, the only reason there are no kids is because her precious son's swimmers were taken out by a bug. So what does Nangsing do? She plays the role of the concerned doctor. She feels the mistress's pulse and confirms the pregnancy. But she also notices the mistress is perfectly healthy. Does she tell them? Absolutely not. She puts on an Oscar-worthy performance, furrowing her brow and sighing heavily. And here is the absolute genius of Nangsing. She goes home, washes the makeup off, and pretends to be deathly ill. When Zhou Yanshu comes home looking for money to pay the doctor, Nangsing cries and says she needs a doctor herself. He tells her to just sweat it out because they are broke. He will spend 10 taels of silver for his mistress's fake medical emergency, but won't spend a single copper coin to save his actual wife's life. From that moment on, Nangsing uses her dark doctor persona to bleed him dry. She makes him sell his ancestral land. She drains every single penny he has. It is the most satisfying financial judo I have ever witnessed. What big talk, a poor, struggling scholar, who couldn't even afford the cheapest medicine from the Imperial Medical Bureau. What would he use to pay this astronomical consultation fee? Naturally, by exploiting me, this foolish woman who gathers herbs in the mountains and works through the nights at the ghost market. Fine, since you want to preserve the pregnancy, then I'll grant your wish. As a benevolent healer, I will definitely help you both keep this bastard child safe and sound. That night when I left the Liu family's small courtyard, wind and snow raged together. I didn't shed tears. My parents who died during our exile taught me that tears are the most useless thing. Since Zhou Yanshu threw my heart on the ground and trampled it, then I'll swallow their whole family down, skin and bones. The next day at noon, Zhou Yanshu finally dragged his exhausted body back home. As soon as he pushed open the door, he habitually rubbed his shoulders, sighing heavily. Nangsing, I am so tired. I was at the bookshop copying rare manuscripts all night long, and now my back and waist are aching. In the past, when he acted like this, I would have already rushed over with heartache to massage his shoulders and back, and serve him hot food and dishes. But today, I applied thick lead powder on my face in advance, made my lips look deathly pale, weakly stuck half my body out from the bed, and started coughing violently. Cough, cough, husband, you are back. Zhou Yanshu clearly didn't expect me to fall ill. He froze for a moment, a flash of panic in his eyes, and hurriedly came forward to support me. Wife, what is wrong with you? I weakly forced out a bitter smile. Yesterday, when I went deep into the mountains to gather medicine, I accidentally fell into an icy pond and developed a high fever. But I am better today. Don't worry. Hearing that I fell into an icy pond, genuine guilt showed in Zhou Yanshu's eyes. He fumbled clumsily to tuck in the corners of my blanket. You are just too hard on yourself. I am here to take care of the family. Now lie down quickly. I'll go make you some porridge. Half an hour later, he brought over a bowl of watery millet porridge with only a few shreds of pickled vegetables floating on top. Meanwhile, in that small courtyard, my mother-in-law was stewing old hen soup every single day to serve Liu Wanyin. I expressionlessly finished the porridge, and sure enough, Zhou Yanshu started speaking haltingly. Nanxing, there is something I must apologize to you for. I was really too tired from copying books yesterday, and I accidentally knocked over the inkstone, ruining a rare book from the previous dynasty at the bookstore. The shopkeeper was furious and demanded I compensate him 10 taels of silver, or else he'll take me to see the magistrate. 10 taels of silver, not a cent more or less exactly. The early-stage pregnancy care fees I quoted him last night. I suddenly widened my eyes, pretending to be anxious. 10 taels? But we barely have money left to buy rice. Oh, right, husband. What about the double-fish jade pendant at your waist? Why don't you pawn it first to deal with this emergency? Zhou Yanshu's whole body stiffened, and he lied without changing his expression. On the way home yesterday, I unfortunately encountered a thief and it was stolen. Nanxing, do you really not have even a bit of silver left on you? Looking at his hypocritical face, I suddenly let out a miserable scream and rolled around on the bed, clutching my head tightly. Ah, husband, my head hurts so much. It feels like it is going to split open. Quick, quick! Take money and fetch a physician from the Imperial Medical Bureau for me. Zhou Yanshu was terrified. He spun around anxiously in the room, rummaging through boxes and cabinets for a long time, but couldn't even find half a copper coin. In the end, he could only sit dejectedly by the bedside, covering his face in anguish. Nanxing, it is my uselessness as a husband. We really don't have money to hire a physician. Just bear with it for now, sleep it off and sweat it out, and you'll be fine. Look at that. This is the husband I've wholeheartedly served for 3 years. He could lavishly spend 10 taels of silver for his mistress's bastard, yet wouldn't spare a single coin to save his lawful wife's life. I closed my eyes, concealing the overwhelming hatred within them. From this moment on, the life and death of the Zhou family was all within my calculations. After that day, I fell ill. Not only was I bedridden and unable to go up the mountain to gather herbs, even the family's 3 daily meals were skipped. Zhou Yanshu was forced into desperation and went to the ghost market again to seek help from me, the dark doctor, in just 1 month under various pretexts. The pregnancy is unstable and requires century-old ginseng. The old madam's liver fire is too vigorous and needs rare medicine for regulation. I earned back every bit of savings he had scraped together from home, principal and interest included. He had no money left. But Liu Wanyin's pregnancy had to be protected, and Joshu's supplements couldn't be stopped. To maintain his act as a devoted husband full of tender affection, Zhou Yanshu could only set his sights on the ancestral property. He secretly sold the family's last remaining 5 mu of paddy fields, and exchanged them for 80 taels of silver. This matter couldn't be hidden. When Zhou Shu found out, she fainted on the spot from anger. Zhou Yanshu summoned me, the dark doctor. Overnight, I took the old woman's pulse and sneered inwardly. She was already broad-bodied and stout, and with her blood and qi surging turbulently, she was showing signs of a stroke. I prescribed a strong medicine with an expressionless face. This medicine contained an extremely heavy dose of aconite and erythema, which on the surface could quickly clear the meridians and suppress the illness, making her lively and energetic, but in reality, it was like cooking oil over a raging fire. As long as she received another major shock in the future, her illness would come crashing down like a mountain, and even immortals couldn't save her. For this life-hastening prescription, I charged Zhou Yanshu 20 taels. After another month passed, the money Zhou Yanshu had from selling the field was running out again. That day he paced around the house like an ant on a hot pan, then suddenly turned on me with reddened eyes. "Nangsing, how can you be so inconsiderate? I work so hard copying books outside. Isn't it all for this family? But what about you? Ever since you got sick, you haven't brought home a single penny." I held up my sleeves full of patches and lowered my eyes aggrievedly. "Husband, my body is really too weak to walk into the deep mountains. Moreover, didn't you always say that scholars have their pride? How could there be any reason to rely on a woman to support the family?" Zhou Yanshu was choked speechless by me, his face flushed red. He flicked his sleeve and slumped dejectedly into the broken wooden chair, muttering to himself, Got to think of a way to get a large sum of money." Watching his greedy yet incompetent appearance, I knew it was time to give him a push. The next day, when I went to the Liu family's small courtyard for a follow-up visit, Liu Wanyan beat around the bush asking me for medicine. "Divine physician, the lady next door always suffers from insomnia at night. Do you have any calming incense that can make someone sleep deeply, so deep that even thunder won't wake them?" I understood what she meant and handed her a packet of specially prepared incense powder, without showing any emotion. 5 taels of silver, just a soybean-sized amount, will make someone sleep soundly until dawn. Why did Liu Wanyin want this incense? Because she wanted to secretly meet her lover. That day when I took her pulse, I discovered her qi and blood were unstable. Not the weakness expected during pregnancy, but rather from excessive indulgence. Mixed in with the scent on her body was a faint fragrance of agarwood and western region spices. In this town, the only one who could afford such expensive spices was that arrogant and domineering nouveau riche's son Chen Yaozu. Chen Yaozu was a wastrel whose body had been hollowed out by wine and women, often sending his servant to the night market to buy herbs for his carnal pleasures. Thinking about how Zhou Shushu was ruining himself financially trying to preserve Chen Yaozu's offspring, while Chen Yaozu was sleeping with his mistress behind his back, I found this whole show absolutely spectacular. Just as I expected, for the sake of money, Zhou Shushu finally took the most vicious step. He wanted to pawn me to the Chen family. Although the current dynasty has expressly forbidden it, in remote areas there is still the evil practice of poor families renting out their wives to wealthy households to survive. Master Chen and that Chen Yaozi are cut from the same cloth. Both are no good. The number of innocent women who fell into the hands of this father and son is beyond count. To secure Zhou Yanshu entirely for herself, Liu Wanyin egged him on to hand me over to the Chen family, as an indentured servant bound for life, in exchange for 50 taels of silver. That night, Zhou Yanshu unusually bought a roast chicken, saying he wanted to take me to town for a proper meal, as compensation for all my hard work over the years. I changed into the pink roof skirt I wore when I married him, and sat in the bustling restaurant. I could clearly feel that from the private room on the second floor. The Chen family steward was looking me over with eyes like he was sizing up livestock, his gaze crawling all over my body in a slimy way. Zhou Yanshu attentively served me food, his eyes evasive. "Nangsing, eat more, in the future. You might not get to eat like this again." I chewed the food in my mouth as if I were chewing Zhou Yanshu's flesh and blood. Husband speaks the truth. I swallowed the food and smiled gently at him. No one in this world can escape karmic retribution. I didn't give Zhou Yanshu the chance to sell me, because that very night, I snuck outside the Liu family's small courtyard and quietly sprinkled a colorless, tasteless datura flower powder, one that could cause qi and blood to flow in reverse and make one lose all reason. On the windowsill where Lu Wanyin and Chen Yaozi were having their secret rendezvous. Not only that, I also scattered a few farm tools used for chopping wood and hoeing in inconspicuous corners of the yard in advance, making them look extremely natural. This is where the story goes full gone girl. Zhou Yanshu runs out of money. To keep his mistress happy, he plans to rent out Nangsing to a wealthy predator as a lifelong indentured servant. He is going to sell his devoted wife into slavery. Nangsing doesn't wait. She sneaks over to the mistress's courtyard while the real baby daddy, a toxic rich playboy, is visiting. She sprinkles weaponized datura flower powder, a hallucinogen that induces blinding rage in the windowsill. And like a true mastermind, the next morning she forces her husband to run to town for medicine. He walks in, catches his mistress with the playboy, and the datura powder kicks in. The men, fueled by toxic ego and hallucinogens, grab the conveniently placed weapons. Nangsing arrives with the police, plays the devastated widow, gets a massive cash settlement from the playboy's family, and buys her husband the absolute cheapest wooden coffin available. Chef's kiss. The next morning before dawn, I pretended to have a stomachache and woke Zhou Yanshu up from his sleep. Husband, I am in terrible pain. We're out of medicine at home. Hurry and go to the clinic in town to get me some medicine. Although Zhou Yanshu was extremely reluctant, fearing that I might simply fall ill and die, leaving him unable to make any money, he could only grumblingly throw on his clothes and head out. Calculating the time, the drug's effect should be at its peak. So Chen Yaozi must still be unconscious on Liu Wanyin's bed. The road Zhou Yanshu would take to the clinic in town would pass right by the Liu family's small courtyard. Everything happened exactly as I had precisely calculated. Half an hour later, heart-wrenching roars erupted from the Liu family's small courtyard, when I arrived with several neighbors under the pretext of looking for my husband. The tragic scene in the yard made everyone gasp. Zhou Yanshu had intended to drop by to see his mistress, but instead caught Liu Wanyin and Chen Yaozi lying disheveled on the bed. Men value face above all else, let alone Zhou Yanshu, who had given everything for this mistress. The effects of the datura pollen amplified the frenzy and violence in both men. Chen Yaozu, who was used to bullying others, not only didn't panic when his weakness was exposed, but arrogantly mocked Zhou Yanshu as a living cuckold raising a bastard for someone else. This sentence completely destroyed Zhou Yanshu's sanity. The two men brawled in the courtyard. Chen Yaozu was physically weak from excessive indulgence, and Zhou Yanshu was already frail to begin with. The two bit at each other like mad dogs. In the chaos, they each grabbed the hoe and cleaver that I had, carelessly left in the corner of the courtyard. There were no extra words, only red-eyed killing. By the time the bailiffs arrived, this farce had already come to an end. Zhou Yanshu and Chen Yaozu both lay in pools of blood. Because vital parts were injured, and they had lost too much blood, the doctor couldn't even insert a needle. They died on the spot. Zhou Shushi had been sleeping under my specially made calming incense, but was awakened by the screams outside. She rushed out the door just in time to witness her proud son breathe his last. Under the enormous shock, the tightly wound string in her mind completely snapped. With a heh sound, her eyes rolled back and she fell straight down, suffering a stroke and paralysis on the spot, never able to utter another word again. And the instigator, Liu Wanyin, accidentally fell on the stone steps while trying to break up the fight, and that bastard child in her belly, who knows whose it was, turned into a pool of blood. When the bailiffs brought me to the scene, I timely displayed the grief that a widowed woman who lost her husband should have. I threw myself on Zhou Yanshu's cold corpse, crying so hard I nearly fainted several times. The neighbors all shed tears for me, this devoted and pitiful frail wife. The Chen family was at fault from the start. Their son's illicit affair with someone led to a murder case. To quell public anger, the county magistrate ordered the Chen family to compensate the Zhou family with 100 taels of silver, taking that heavy 100 taels of compensation money. I bought Zhou Yanshu the thinnest willow wood coffin available. 7 days later, heavy snow fell. I wore a plain white dress and brought the freshly brewed medicinal soup to Zhou Shu. She was bedridden and paralyzed. Her mouth and eyes were twisted. She stared at me with all her might, making wheezing, gurgling sounds from her throat, as if trying to ask why I was still alive. I smiled faintly, leaned close to her ear, and said softly, "Mother-in-law, I forgot to tell you. Your precious son was poisoned in a way that made it impossible for him to ever father children in this lifetime. That golden grandson your whole family wanted to protect was nothing but a bastard. The Chen family didn't want. Zhou Shu's pupils suddenly dilated, extreme fear and regret flashing in her eyes. Then, unable to catch her breath, she died completely. I didn't cry, just held that bowl of medicine I hadn't fed her, and slowly walked into the courtyard. The snow filled the sky, covering this small courtyard full of schemes and filth completely. This heavy snow is really wonderful, clean and pure without leaving a trace of filth. From now on, I, Li Nangsing, am free again. So what is this story really trying to tell us? On the surface, it's a brilliant blood-pumping revenge thriller, but underneath, it is a deeply emotional, terrifying look at the trap of the sacrificial wife. I want to talk to my ladies watching this right now. How many of us have dimmed our own light so a man could shine? Nangsing was a highly skilled, brilliant doctor. She had a gift that could have made her wealthy, respected, and fiercely independent. But what did she do? She hid her brilliance, washed her hands of her career, and wore patched, ragged clothes just to make her insecure husband feel like the man of the house. She literally risked her freedom in the underground market to pay for his dreams, while he was using her money to build a life with someone else. How many of us have handed over our energy, our paychecks, our emotional labor, and our youth to support his potential? We do it thinking that our sacrifice will buy their loyalty. The tragic reality is that Zhou Yanshu didn't value Nangsing because she made herself too available, too forgiving, and too useful. He stopped seeing her as a human being with a soul, and started seeing her as an asset to be liquidated. He was literally willing to sell her into sexual slavery without a second thought. But the moment the illusion shatters, Nangsing does something we can all learn from. She doesn't try to win him back. She doesn't confront the mistress in a screaming match. She doesn't ask, "Why wasn't I enough?" She realizes that you cannot negotiate your worth with someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, she weaponizes their own greed, their own toxicity, and their own lies against them. The detail that gave me absolute chills, the moment that made me cry for her, is the very last scene. It is snowing. The toxic mother-in-law has suffered a stroke from the shock of her son's death. She is paralyzed in bed, unable to speak, glaring at Nangsing with pure hatred. Nangsing doesn't yell. She leans in close, smiles, and whispers the ultimate truth. Your son was infertile. That golden grandson you ruined our lives to protect was just another man's bastard. The shock literally kills the old woman. And Nangsing, she doesn't shed a tear. She holds the bowl of medicine, walks out into the courtyard, and breathes in the cold, clean air. The snow is falling, covering all the filth, all the lies, and all the years she spent shrinking herself to fit into their tiny, toxic world. She is finally completely free. This isn't just a story about punishing a cheater. It's about a woman remembering who she was before she let a man define her. She came into this marriage as a brilliant doctor, and she is leaving it as a wealthy, liberated woman who will never, ever hide her talents again. Now, I want to turn this over to you, because this story brought up so many intense feelings, and I need to know where you stand. First, let's talk about that final scene. Nangsing leans over the paralyzed mother-in-law, who verbally abused her for years, and whispers the devastating truth about the infertility in the bastard child, knowing the shock might kill her, and it does. Did Nangsing go too far? Or was that the exact level of petty, poetic justice that woman deserved? Be honest with me, if you were in Nangsing's shoes. Would you have let the old woman die thinking her son was a tragic hero? Or would you have delivered that final lethal reality check? Are you team tell her everything or team let karma do? Second, and more importantly, have you ever had to unshrink yourself after a toxic relationship? Have you ever realized you were playing small to protect a partner's fragile ego, and finally decided to step back into your full power? Drop your verdicts and your glow-up stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and this community is a safe space to celebrate women taking their power back. If Nangsing's mastermind energy gave you life today, share this video with a friend who needs a reminder to never play small for a man. I am Liyue. Keep your crown straight, ladies. I'll see you in the next one.